Rich Lewis lived most of his life in the remote mountains of Montana, a place where silence speaks louder than people. He preferred the company of wild animals more than crowded towns, and those who met him described him as a man who carried the weight of the wilderness on his shoulders. For years, viewers of his show admired his ability to track animals, survive snowstorms, and handle danger with a calm face that made him look almost invincible. But behind the quiet personality, there was a man dealing with battles that most people never saw. The rugged life he chose demanded strength every single day, and he often pushed his limits in ways that shocked even people who had lived in the wild all their lives. His barn stood as a symbol of that life, filled with tools, memories, and secrets collected over decades. No one ever imagined that this barn would become the center of a disturbing revelation that would leave fans speechless. Rich always kept his barn locked, even though he trusted his neighbors. Most people thought it was because he stored valuable survival equipment, rare animal hides, and tools he had crafted by hand. But for a long time, Rich avoided talking about certain parts of his barn. He often changed the subject when people asked about old boxes or unusual smells coming from the place. Years went by, and the mystery only grew, especially after he left the show and slowly disappeared from the public eye. People who lived near him said Rich had been acting different in his final months on the series. He seemed tired, distracted, and sometimes stood silently for minutes, staring into the woods as if waiting for something to appear. Neighbors said he visited the barn more often than usual, even late at night. Some claimed they heard strange sounds from inside, but they never asked him directly because they respected his privacy. Rich was the type of man who didn't like being questioned. After Rich left Mountain Men, rumors started spreading about why he stepped away. Some believed it was his age catching up with him. Others thought he had suffered injuries that were too painful to continue working in such dangerous conditions. A few even whispered that he was hiding something serious. But no one expected that years later, this very barn would be opened and reveal something so disturbing that it changed the way people saw Rich Lewis forever. When the barn door was opened, the air inside felt heavy, as if holding old memories trapped for too long. Dust floated slowly, and the smell of wood mixed with something bitter that made people step back for a moment. The first sight was normal enough: ropes hanging from nails, hunting gear stacked on shelves, and animal pelts rolled and tied. But as they moved deeper, the usual tools of a mountain man were replaced by objects no one thought Rich would keep. Hidden under a tarp was a collection of damaged traps, each one showing signs of violent struggle. Some were bent in ways that didn't make sense for regular animal captures. The claws and teeth marks on them were deep and aggressive, almost as if something much larger than normal wildlife had fought for survival. People looked at the traps with confusion, unsure why Rich kept them instead of throwing them away years ago. Next to the traps were notebooks, dusty and filled with handwriting that changed over time. Early pages were neat, describing daily life, weather changes, and animal movements. But later entries became chaotic, with hurried lines, crossed-out sentences, and strange descriptions of sounds he heard at night. He mentioned shadows moving around the barn, heavy footsteps near his window, and animals acting strangely in the woods. The notes grew darker, suggesting he believed something was stalking him. One entry stood out more than the rest. Rich wrote that he found deep claw marks on the barn door one morning, marks that did not match any animal he knew. He wrote that the tracks around the barn were larger than wolf prints, yet the stride was closer to something walking upright. That single page shook everyone, because Rich was known for his knowledge of wildlife. If he didn't recognize the creature, then what was it? In a corner of the barn, covered with an old quilt, they found bones that had been carefully arranged. Some were from deer, some from smaller animals, but others were harder to identify. No one understood why Rich kept them separated in groups, except for one note where he wrote that something had been dragging animals near his property. He claimed he only collected the bones to study what was killing them. The discovery raised more questions than answers. As investigators continued, they found something even more disturbing: an old camera with footage still saved on the memory card. The video showed nighttime recordings of the barn's surroundings. At first, the footage was normal, showing shadows of trees moving with the wind. But after several minutes, the camera shook as if something heavy had passed in front of it. At one point, a tall figure appeared briefly on the edge of the screen, too blurry to identify but clearly bigger than any human or animal expected in that region. The shape disappeared quickly, but its presence was enough to unsettle anyone who watched it. The more they explored, the more it felt like the barn held pieces of a puzzle that Rich had spent years trying to understand. Some neighbors believed he might have been investigating something unusual in the mountains, something he never felt ready to talk about publicly. Others suggested he kept the secrets to protect people from worrying or panicking. Whatever the truth was, Rich appeared to carry this burden alone, and his barn was the only place where he stored the evidence of what he believed was a threat. As news spread about the discovery, fans were divided. Some argued that the findings were being exaggerated, while others said Rich had hinted for years that the wilderness held mysteries beyond normal knowledge. Those closest to him remembered his words about the mountains being alive in ways most people never experienced. They wondered if Rich had seen something he couldn't forget, something that changed his understanding of nature forever. The barn also contained letters he never sent, addressed to family and close friends. In these letters, he expressed fear, confusion, and exhaustion. He wrote that he felt watched and that the nights had become too quiet. The tone of the letters showed a man who no longer trusted the peace he once loved. He described hearing growls that didn't match wolves, and seeing eyes in the dark that were too far off the ground to belong to a normal animal. The discovery of these letters painted a painful picture of a man losing sleep and fighting a battle he felt he could not win. The barn, once a simple shelter for supplies, had turned into a kind of secret archive for everything he feared. People began to question whether Rich had been dealing with physical danger or something more psychological, something that slowly pushed him deeper into isolation. Even after the investigation ended, many questions remained unanswered. No one could say for sure what the large figure in the video was. The strange tracks, the claw marks on the door, the damaged traps, and the distressed journal entries left too many gaps to create a complete explanation. But one thing was clear: Rich Lewis had been struggling with something unusual long before anyone knew. Fans who once saw him as a symbol of strength now understood that his life had a darker side. The wilderness he loved so deeply may have shown him something that he wished he had never witnessed. His barn revealed secrets that probably should have stayed hidden, but once exposed, they changed the way people remembered him. Instead of only seeing the fearless mountain man, people now saw a man who endured fear in silence. The disturbing discovery became a turning point in the way people discussed Rich Lewis's life. It opened conversations about the dangers of living alone in the wild, the mental toll of isolation, and the mysteries that still exist in remote places. Many believed Rich was trying to understand something that scared him, and the barn was the only space where he left the truth behind. His final years on the show made more sense in light of these findings, especially his sudden departure. By the end of the investigation, the barn was no longer just a building. It became a symbol of the hidden side of survival, the part people never see on camera. Rich Lewis lived through moments that were never shared with the world, moments that changed his understanding of what lurked in the mountains. His barn held stories that were never meant to be discovered, but now that they had been found, they revealed a disturbing view of his final years in the wilderness. When news of the barn's contents spread beyond the local community, people who followed Rich Lewis for years were stunned. They had seen him chase mountain lions, track wolves, and survive brutal winters. They never imagined he was dealing with something so unsettling right at home. As people tried to make sense of the discovery, more details emerged, painting an even more complex picture of what Rich had faced. Those who visited the barn reported that the deeper they looked, the clearer it became that Rich had been documenting something for a long time. His notebooks weren't random. They followed patterns, observations, dates, and sketches. Some pages contained symbols he drew repeatedly, shapes that looked like tracks but weren't from any known animal. The marks had long strides and claw shapes that curved in ways experts said did not match common predators. Local trackers, men who spent decades studying wildlife in Montana, were unsettled by the sketches. One man claimed he had once seen similar tracks near the edge of the forest after a storm, but he dismissed them at the time because they looked unnatural. Seeing Rich's drawings made him question whether he should have looked deeper back then. For many locals, the barn discovery felt like a warning they never expected. The footage found on the old camera became a major point of discussion. It wasn't perfectly clear, but there was something about the movement of the tall figure that didn't match typical wildlife. Its posture, the way it moved, the speed at which it crossed the frame, everything looked unnatural. Some people argued it was a bear standing upright, but even they admitted the height seemed wrong. Others suggested it was a person, but the shape didn't match human proportions. Rich's journal entries became even more disturbing when read alongside the footage. In one entry, he wrote about hearing a heavy thump on his roof late at night, followed by dragging sounds. Another entry described him waking up to find the barn door wide open even though he had locked it before bed. He wrote that he stopped going outside without carrying a rifle because he felt watched every time he stepped into the woods. As people read the journals, they began to understand why Rich's personality changed during his final seasons on the show. He became quieter, more reserved, and often looked over his shoulder as if listening for something. His co-stars mentioned that Rich sometimes arrived at filming tired and distracted, saying he heard something outside his cabin the night before. They brushed it off as common mountain life, but the barn discovery showed that Rich took these events far more seriously.